Dadperfectrevenge. I was still wearing my apron when she said it. I'd been up since 5 that morning. The turkey had been in the oven for 4 hours. The kitchen smelled like everything Thanksgiving is supposed to smell like: sage, butter, the green bean casserole my mother taught me to make back in 1987. Oven mitts on the counter, reading glasses pushed up on my forehead, dish towel over my shoulder. Stacy walked in, looked me over, and said it calm as a weather forecast. "Earl, you've been working so hard all day. Why don't you sit this one out? You don't have to host. My house, my turkey. My name on the deed since 1993. Sit this one out. I want to tell you how I got there, because it didn't start that morning. It never starts the morning everything falls apart. My name is Earl Kowalski. I'm 61 years old. I live in a 2-story house on Mercer Road outside of Dayton, Ohio. My wife Nora and I bought this place in 1993 and spent the better part of 2 years making it ours. New floors in the kitchen, a proper front porch, curtains she sewed herself from fabric she found at a shop downtown. That's been closed for years now. I built the back garage myself in the summer of 2003, poured the slab, framed the walls, ran the electrical with help from my buddy Pete. Nora painted the garage door red because she said it looked too plain without some color. I told her red was a lot. She said that was the point. She passed away 4 years ago. Breast cancer. We had 31 years together, 31 years of the good kind of ordinary that you don't know you're going to miss until it's gone. This is the story of how I almost lost the house she painted that door for. It started on a Tuesday in October, about 16 months before that Thanksgiving morning. My son Gil called me from the parking lot of his apartment complex. I could tell from the first 3 words, "Hey Dad," that something was off. Gil is 34. He does HVAC service calls, keeps his own schedule, been doing it for 6 years. He has his mother's eyes, that same dark brown that made you want to trust a person before they even got to the point. He told me Stacy's online coaching business had collapsed. She'd been selling personal development courses, the kind you see pushed everywhere online, promises about unlocking your potential and building the life you want. It hadn't worked out. They were sitting on $22,000 in credit card debt and their lease was up in 6 weeks. Could they stay with me for a little while? 2, maybe 3 months, just until they found their footing again. I said yes before he finished asking. Hez, my son, of course I said yes. They moved in on a Saturday with a rented trailer, 2 cats, and more boxes than I expected for people who were supposedly traveling light. I'd cleared out the spare bedroom, the bigger one, with the window that faces the backyard and the maple tree Nora planted when Gil was 9 years old. I put clean sheets on the bed, left towels folded on the dresser, moved my workbench magazines off the nightstand and put a lamp there instead. I wanted them to feel welcome. I wanted it to feel like family because that's what it was supposed to be. The first few weeks were quiet in a decent way. Gil got up early for work and we'd have coffee together at the kitchen table before he drove off. Reminded me of mornings when he was in high school and the house was still full of that kind of noise. Stacy came downstairs around 9 or 9:30, set her laptop up at the table, and worked through the afternoon on whatever she was rebuilding. She was polite, kept her things tidy, said please and thank you. I told myself it was going to be fine. Maybe it even was for a while. The first thing that changed was small enough that I almost didn't catch it. There is a shelf in the kitchen just above the coffee maker where I keep a couple of photographs. One is Nora and me at Gil's high school graduation, 2007. She's wearing a yellow dress. I can still picture exactly. The other is just Nora by herself, standing on the dock at her sister's lake house up in Michigan. She's laughing at something happening off to the side, and the light is hitting her face the way light does on good days at a lake. I had those 2 photos on that shelf for years. I don't think about them consciously anymore. They're just part of what the kitchen looks like in the morning. One morning in late October, I came downstairs and the photos were gone. The shelf had a little white potted succulent on it and a small wooden sign that said "Good Vibes Only" in thin script lettering. I opened the drawer next to the silverware. Both photos were in there face down like they'd been filed away. I put them back on the shelf. Moved the plant to the windowsill. Didn't say anything. 2 days later, the photos were in the drawer again. I knocked on their bedroom door that evening. Gil answered still in his work clothes, a smear of something on his forearm from whatever job had come off of. "The photos on the kitchen shelf," I said. "Those stay up." He got that look, his had since he was about 12, the one where he's been caught between 2 things and doesn't know which way to go. Stacy thought it might be good to freshen the space up a little. She's been trying to make it feel more like Gil. I kept my voice steady. "That's your mother?" He nodded, said he'd talk to her. The photos stayed up after that. But something had shifted that I could feel even if I couldn't name it yet. The way you feel a change in weather before it actually comes. By January, already 3 months past their original promise, Stacy had reorganized my kitchen cabinets. I came down one morning looking for my cast iron skillet. I've cooked on that thing for over 20 years. It's seasoned the way a pan gets seasoned when you actually use it. Black and smooth and reliable. It was gone from the rack above the stove. I found it on the floor in the bottom cabinet, wedged behind a set of matching stainless pans Shed bought and arranged on the rack where the iron used to hang. Neat. Orderly, like a magazine photo of someone else's kitchen. It's more functional this way, she said when I came to find her at the dining table. Cast iron is really heavy. I thought it would be easier on you. I'm 61. I carry lumber. I'm not fragile. I didn't say that. I moved the skillet back to the rack and went about my morning. In February, I came home from the hardware store and found Stacy standing in the middle of my garage with her phone out, using one of those laser measuring tools along the far wall. I need you to understand what that garage means to me. It's not storage. It's not just where I park the truck. I built that building from the ground up, poured the slab myself on a hot July weekend, framed the walls with Pete's help, ran the wiring over 2 Saturdays. I put in the long workbench along the back wall, the pegboard above it where every tool has its spot, the fluorescent lights overhead that buzz just slightly when they first come on. Nora used to come out there on Saturday afternoons while I worked. Shud set up the folding table in the corner and refinish furniture. She had a real eye for old chairs and dressers that other people had given up on. Or sometimes she'd just sit on the wooden stool by the door with her coffee and we'd talk about nothing in particular, or not talk at all and just share the space. That garage still smells like sawdust and the cedar oil she used on her oak pieces. I haven't changed that smell on purpose. I was thinking this could work as a filming setup, Stacy said. She had that practical, reasonable tone, the one that made everything sound like a sensible proposal. The lighting inside the house isn't great for video. If I moved some of this equipment to one side, brought in some panels. No, I said. Just that one word. She stopped talking. The garage stays the way it is. She smiled, that calm, recalibrating smile she had for moments when things didn't go her way, and said of course she was just thinking out loud, no problem at all. She went back inside. A week later, I walked in and found 2 ring light stands set up against my workbench, cables running along the floor. And Nora's toolbox, the small red metal one with her name written on a strip of masking tape on the side. The tape gone yellow and soft at the edges from years of handling had been moved to a shelf in the back corner and covered with a drop cloth. Like it was clutter, like it was something in the way. I pulled the cloth off. I put the toolbox back on the bench where it belongs. I carried the ring lights out to the driveway and set them by the door. I went back inside and made myself a cup of coffee, and I stood at the kitchen window and looked out at the maple tree for a while. By this point, we were 5 months in. The 2 to 3 months had come and gone without a word. No mention of apartments. No mention of timelines. I'd brought it up once in January. Gentle and Gil had said things were still tight, just a little more time. He appreciated my patience. Id let it go. I kept letting things go. That was the problem. I want to be straight with you. Up until March, I was still telling myself it was inconsideration. People had grown up differently. Someone who hadn't learned yet how to exist inside another person's home without trying to reshape it. I gave the benefit of the doubt because that's what you do with family, or what you try to do. I found out in March that I'd been wrong about all of it. I sat down at the kitchen table one afternoon to look up parts for the riding mower. Gil lets me use his laptop sometimes when mine runs slow. His email was open in the browser. I wasn't looking for anything, but the subject line sat there right in front of me. The Mercer Road situation. I shouldn't have read it. I did. It was a thread between Stacy and her sister Renee going back about 2 months. Stacy had been asking about something called adverse possession, a legal doctrine where a person can potentially claim ownership of property after occupying it continuously for a long enough period. Renee had sent her a link to a law firm's website. There were several exchanges back and forth. Near the bottom, Stacy's most recent reply. The lawyer said we need at least 21 months of continuous occupation and to have the address established as our primary residence on record, utility bills, mail, that kind of thing. We're at 5 months now. If we can get to next fall without disruption, she said we'd have a solid basis to file. He want pushback. His not that type. I sat there with my hands flat on the table. The house was quiet. I could hear the refrigerator running. Somewhere upstairs, one of the cats was moving around. Then I closed the laptop, put on my jacket, and walked out to the garage. I stood at the workbench for a long time without touching anything. There's a rocking chair sitting at the end of the bench that I started building in the fall of 2020, the same month Nora got her diagnosis. White oak. Shed picked the design out of a woodworking book she gave me the previous Christmas, pointed to it and said that's the one I want on the back porch someday. I got about halfway through before everything else happened. After she was gone, I kept meaning to go back to it. Kept telling myself I would when I was ready. 4 years later, it was still sitting there, half-assembled, waiting. I'd walked past it probably 1,000 times and never once picked up where I left off. I stood there looking at that chair, looking at Norris' red toolbox on the bench, looking at the garage door she painted. Something in my head went very quiet and then very clear. This was not carelessness. This was not a young woman who hadn't learned how to be a considerate house guest. There was a timeline. There was a lawyer. There was a plan that had been running for months while I made the coffee and moved the cast iron back to its rack and told myself to be patient. He won't push back. He's not that type. I went back inside. I didn't say anything to either of them that evening. I made dinner, watched the news, said goodnight. I didn't tip my hand by so much as a change in expression. I spent 28 years managing a floor full of workers at a steel plant. I knew how to keep my face neutral when I needed to. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and wrote down everything I could remember. Dates, incidents, what was said, what was moved, what was replaced. The photos, the skillet, the garage, the ring lights. I went back as far as I could and I wrote it all down in order. I called Pete Novak first thing the next morning from my truck parked at the end of the driveway so I wouldn't be overheard. Pete doesn't rattle easily. We worked together through most of the 90s at the same plant, kept in touch after it closed, fished together every spring for the past 15 years. He's the kind of man who listens to the whole thing before he says a word. When I finished, he was quiet for about 3 seconds. "Earl," he said, "you need a real estate attorney, not next week, today." I called Faye Odom that same afternoon. Her office is on Salem Avenue, a low brick building with her name on a modest sign out front. I'd driven past it 100 times on the way to the diner where Gil and I used to get breakfast on Sunday mornings, back before all of this, when Sunday still felt like something good. She had me come in that day at 4 o'clock. I brought my notepad and the screenshot Eddie'd taken of the email thread before I closed the laptop. Faye listened to all of it without interrupting. She pulled up the Ohio adverse possession statute while I was still talking, read something on her screen, then set her glasses down and looked at me. First thing, she said, Ohio's threshold for adverse possession is 21 years, not 21 months. Whoever she consulted gave her bad information. She doesn't have a viable claim and won't have one on any reasonable timeline. I felt something release in my chest that I hadn't realized I'd been holding. But, she said, and held up one hand, that doesn't mean she can't make your life complicated. If she establishes this address as her legal residence of record, gets her name on a utility account, registers a vehicle here, files taxes from this address, you can end up in a dispute over occupancy rights that cost you time and money even though you'd win in the end. The goal is to make sure it never gets that far. She told me exactly what I needed to do. A formal written notice to vacate, properly drafted and served, creating an unambiguous legal record of the date and terms. Documentation of any changes made to the property without my consent. Removal of any names from accounts associated with the property. I asked her about the email. She looked at the screenshot on my phone for a moment. Keep every copy. Screenshot it, back it up, print it. It establishes intent. If this ever went to any kind of hearing, that email is significant. She paused. It also tells you something about who you're dealing with. I want you to take that seriously. I drove home in the early dark of a March evening and sat in the truck in the driveway for a few minutes looking at the house. The lights were on inside. I could see movement through the kitchen window, my kitchen, my house, my light. Then I went inside and I got to work. I didn't change how I acted around them. Same coffee in the morning, same easy conversation at the table, same goodnight in the hallway. Nothing in my face or my voice that suggested anything had shifted. But the next day, I put a small camera up near the ceiling beam, in the garage mounted on a bracket, pointed at the workbench area. Compact, unobtrusive, legal on my own property. I set it to record on motion. I started a dated photo log on my phone, locked with a passcode, every room, every change, every item that had been moved or replaced or covered without my permission. I had 17 entries in that log within the first 2 weeks just for memory and a walkthrough of the house. I called my homeowner's insurance company and asked them to confirm who was listed on the policy, my name only. Good. The representative mentioned that someone had called the previous month asking about adding a co-resident. I told him clearly no additions, no changes, nothing without a written request from me personally. He noted it in the file. I called the gas company. I called the electric company. Same conversation, same instructions. I called Faye back and told her I was ready for the notice to vacate. She said she'd have it prepared and ready for my review by end of the week. I told her to go ahead. In September, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, Stacy told me she was planning a gathering at the house. Her sister Renee, some people from her coaching network, a few friends, around 14 guests. She said it in the tone of someone announcing a decision that had already been made. "I'll need to be part of the planning," I said. "Oh, I have it all handled," she said. "You really don't need to worry about any of it." I looked at her. "It's my house, Stacy. I'm involved in what happens here, of course," she said with that smile. "Of course you are. I cooked that Thanksgiving from scratch, up at 5 in the morning, same as I've always done it. Turkey in the oven by 6 18 pounds, dry brined the way Nora taught me. The skin that particular dark gold that takes patience to get right. Mashed potatoes from real potatoes, not a box. Green bean casserole using my mother's handwritten recipe card that's been in the same kitchen drawer since 1991. The edges soft and stained from years of handling. Cranberry sauce from scratch because the canned stuff has never tasted right to me. 2 pies, apple and pumpkin because it was Thanksgiving and I had the time and because that's just what you do. Stacy had rearranged the dining room the evening before. I'd come downstairs that morning and stood in the doorway for a moment, taking it in. My walnut chairs, some of them 30 years old, found one at a time at estate sales because I liked the style and was willing to wait for the right ones, had been pushed to the perimeter to make room for folding chairs I'd never seen before. The table had been shifted off-center. The sideboard moved to the far wall. On the table, some kind of arrangement with bare branches and tall white candles, the kind of thing that comes in a box from a home decor shop. And on the floor next to the sideboard, sitting on a piece of newspaper, was the carved wooden bowl Nora bought at a craft fair in 2009. I fill it with gourds and pine cones every November. I have done that every single year since she bought it. It was sitting on that newspaper like something waiting to be thrown out. I picked it up, put it in the center of the table where it belongs. Moved the branch arrangement to the sideboard, straightened the chairs as best I could. Then I went back to the kitchen and kept cooking. Guests arrived at 6. Renee came in first, Stacy's sister, a tall woman with a careful manner. She shook my hand and held it a beat longer than a normal handshake, with that specific look people get when they're aware of something uncomfortable and don't know what to do with that awareness. I just said it was good to see her and meant it. Some women from Stacy's business circle arrived in pairs, polished and pleasant. A couple I'd never met who turned out to be neighbors of Renee's from Columbus. I was in the kitchen when Stacy came in about 10 minutes before we were going to eat. Apron on, oven mitts on the counter, reading glasses pushed up on my forehead, dish towel over my shoulder. 4 hours of cooking behind me, and probably another 40 minutes of work ahead. She looked me over, took in all of it, and something moved briefly across her face before she got control of it. "Earl." Her voice was even quiet, the way you'd explain something obvious to someone who'd missed the point. "You've been on your feet all day. Why don't you take it easy tonight? Sit this one out. You don't have to host." I looked at her for a moment. Sit this one out, in the house I've owned for 31 years. My food in the oven. My name on every document in the filing cabinet in the back bedroom. I reached back and untied the apron, folded it once and set it on the counter. Walked into the dining room. She had brought in 2 extra folding tables to extend the length and set 14-place settings using dishes I'd never seen before. White, minimalist. Nothing like Nora's good china that was still in the sideboard 2 feet away. My usual placemats, the braided ones Nora ordered from a catalog years ago and that I'd used every Thanksgiving since, were nowhere in sight. I went to the sideboard. I took out Nora's good china, the cream color set with the small blue border, the one we received as a wedding gift in 1988 and used for every holiday for 3 decades. I reset the head of the table with it. I put one of the braided placemats down that I found folded in the second drawer. Then I pulled out my chair, the one at the head of the table, the one I sat in for the first time the Thanksgiving after we moved in, the one I've sat in every year since, and I sat down. Stacy appeared in the doorway. Her jaw was set. She looked at the place setting, at the bowl of gourds and pine cones in the center, at me sitting in my chair. She didn't say anything. I turned toward Renee, who had just come through from the living room with one of the Columbus neighbors. "Renee," I said, "good to see you again. How was the drive down?" Something in her face relaxed immediately. Long but fine. The 71 was actually moving for once, and the evening went. The way an evening does when someone steers it with quiet intention. Stacy came and took her seat. Dinner was served, my turkey, my potatoes, my casserole, my pies. I was easy company. I answered every question about the food. I asked the Columbus couple about the drive, asked Renee about her job. I laughed when it was appropriate, and I meant it. After the guests left, I did the dishes, my kitchen. I find it settling, the rhythm of washing up after a good meal. When the kitchen was clean, I went and sat in the living room. Gil came in and sat across from me. Stacy stayed in the dining room. I could hear her moving the folding chairs around. "Dad." He stopped, started again. "I didn't know she said that to you." "I know," I said. He looked tired in a way that went past one long day. The particular tiredness of a man who has been standing between two things for a long time and has never let himself stop long enough to feel how much it's cost him. "I'm sorry," he said. I looked at my son. He had his mother's eyes. He was 34 years old, and he was still the kid who used to sit cross-legged on the garage floor and hand me socket wrenches without being asked. "Gil, I need you to hear me, not manage it. Actually hear me." He nodded. I found the emails. I know what adverse possession is. I've talked to a lawyer, and I have a legal file with both your names in it. I've been documenting for 7 months. His face went still in a way I recognized, the same stillness as the night I called him to tell him about his mother. I reached to the side table and picked up the envelope Faye had prepared. Formal written notice to vacate, properly dated, ready to be served. I set it on the coffee table between us. February 1st, I said, "That's the date. I will help with first and last month on an apartment if money is still tight." But February 1st is not a suggestion. He didn't argue. He picked up the envelope and held it in both hands and looked at it for a long time. "I think Stacy and I have been using this place to avoid something," he said finally. "Something we needed to deal with a long time ago. It was easier to stay." "I know," I said, "but you can't work it out in my house, son." He nodded slowly. He went upstairs. They moved out January 29th. 3 days ahead of the deadline, I stood on the front porch in my winter jacket and watched them load the last boxes into the truck. When it pulled out of the driveway, I watched it all the way to the end of Mercer Road until it turned and was gone. Then I went to the garage. I turned on the overhead light, put on the radio, the classic rock station out of Dayton that Nora always said was too loud and always ended up singing along to anyway. I opened the bottom drawer of her red toolbox and took out her favorite wood chisel, the short-handled one she kept sharper than any of mine, the one with a little ghost of old varnish on the handle from a dresser she refinished back in 2018. I picked up the rocking chair, the unfinished one, white oak, her design, 4 years waiting. I got back to work. Gil calls twice a week now. Real conversations, not the careful managed kind where everyone is watching what they say. He told me last month that he and Stacy have been seeing a counselor together. I told him that takes guts. I meant every word of it. Stacy sent me a text in February. Short, just a few lines. She said she knew things had gone wrong and that she was sorry for her part in it. I thanked her and I meant that too. It's a hard thing to send a message like that. I don't take it lightly. I finished the rocking chair in March. White oak, just like Nora picked. It's on the back porch now, facing the yard, facing the maple tree she planted when Gil was 9 years old. Some mornings I carry my coffee out there and just sit. Don't listen to anything. Don't check my phone. Just sit and look at that tree. The garage door is still red. Here's the only thing I want to leave you with, whoever you are. It never starts loud. Nobody walks into your house on day one and announces they're taking over. It starts with a photograph moved to a drawer, a pan relocated to the floor, a toolbox covered with a drop cloth. Each one small enough that you tell yourself it isn't worth a confrontation, so you let it go, and you let the next one go, and the silence stacks up until you're standing in your own kitchen being told to sit out your own Thanksgiving. Say something early, say it plain, and say it once. You don't have to be harsh, but you have to be clear, because a wish gets ignored, and a clear statement does not. You built what you have. You paid for it, or you built it with your hands, or you held onto it through years when it would have been easier to walk away. That matters. Don't let anyone make you feel like defending it is something to be embarrassed about. It isn't. It's just sense. And if it turns out you're not dealing with carelessness, but with a plan, stay calm, get a lawyer, and build your file. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to make a scene. One envelope on a coffee table will do it. The people who truly love you will respect a clear line. The ones who don't, they're not showing you a misunderstanding. They're showing you exactly who they are and what they came for. You don't have to be loud to take your life back. You just have to be done explaining, done waiting, done making room for people who were never going to stop taking it.